Welcome to the Volunteer and Combination Officer section webinar. Today, the topic is the volunteer firefighter defining commitment. And we're going to turn it over to Chief Rick Lasky here in a few minutes to talk with you about defining commitment in that volunteer firefighter. But first, what is the VCOS doing? The VCOS is the sponsor of the webinar. We have been doing webinars every week. We've had great response. We're trying to improve the marketing, the partnering with other people so we can get really good attendance, because virtual training is the wave of the future. It's not for everybody, but the young people today, they want to be able to get training when they want to get it. So I'm sure Rick will talk about that. But so the VCOS does the webinar series. We have ribbon reports. If you have not read the best practices for cancer, best practices for behavioral wellness, we have a chaplain program. We have a brand new report out on support animals. I would encourage you to go to the vcos.org website and put in ribbon reports, and it'll take you to that. Chief Lasky and I were talking about their company officer academy that him and John Salka have created. We're going to create an officers academy for the smaller department, the volunteer who has maybe 12 to 14 active members. What's some of the basic training that officer needs? So we're going to try to get that developed in probably the next 6 months from the VCOS. We have in-person workshops, and we do mentoring. If you have a problem, you got a question, you need some support, I encourage you to call one of the VCOS board members, or you can call me or email me, and we'll try to get you some help in trying to address some of the problems that we all have. And we all know that we have them. So that's some of the things that we're doing. So now it's on to our presenter for today, is Chief Rick Lasky, who has more than 40 years in the fire service. He has served from firefighter to fire chief. His last full-time fire chief job was Louisville, Texas, where he was there for 12 years. He built a swimming pool at a fire station. No, it wasn't a swimming pool. He built a training pool that he put a car in to practice submerged car rescues. So my point is that Rick is a creative and innovative kind of person. He has won many awards. The International Society of Fire Service Instructors Innovator of the Year Award on his Saving Our Own program that many of us, including myself, when I was the director of the Fire Academy here in Indiana, I built 15 of those Saving Our Own props that were on wheels so they could be transported to the smallest department. So, Chief Lasky has his Pride and Ownership book out. He has his 5-alarm leadership. He may not try to sell you on those, but I'm telling you, they are excellent, excellent books. And if you want it signed by him, you send it to him and he'll sign it and include the postage to return it, so it doesn't cost him any money. That second part's just my comment. So with Chief Lasky, I will turn it over to you now. Thank you very much for agreeing to do the webinar. It's all yours, sir.
Well, Chief, real quick question. If somebody wanted to see this program later on, is it made available to them via the iChiefs, or is this a one-time shot?
No, thank you very much. Thanks for reminding me of that. Yes, these are recorded, and you will get an email with the link after this. You will get a survey when the webinar is finished. We really want to hear from you and what you want to talk about. So yes, they are recorded and available for anybody. If you weren't registered for it today, you can still log in and watch it at your leisure.
Perfect. Chief, I just want, and we had talked about that before, because to those attending today, it's about spreading the word, and especially for volunteers that are, a lot of them are working right now. A lot of them are paying the bills that you have, our whole lives as volunteers, has been, we've got another family we have to take care of. And so being able to share the wealth and share the information, but it's an honor, Chief, to be here. I'm so glad that you asked. I was excited when you did. Forget even the program we talked about when you said, I want you to come on board and talk to the volunteer firefighters. And I'm like, just tell me when. We missed one date. I was sad, but that was a technical glitch. And then we're back doing this. I was excited when we got it rescheduled. So thank you, Chief, for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
All righty. Hey, to everybody that's joined us, appreciate you taking some time and let me steal a little bit under an hour from you to talk about, what? Let's talk about the love for the job and the volunteer firefighter. And the subhead on the program is defining, commitment, because when you talk about volunteer firefighters, and you hear me say this several times during this program, it takes someone very special to do what we do. I'm currently a volunteer firefighter. I'm a lieutenant and a trained officer with the Wichita West Volunteer Fire Department, Texas. My best buddy in the whole world, Chief John Salka, has been a volunteer. Everybody knows him from the FDNY and the World Trade Center. He's been a volunteer for 50 years. 50 years he's been doing it. The whole time he was at the FDNY. Some of my best friends, some of the greatest people I know, love being a firefighter so much they can't get enough of it. If they're on the career side, they're volunteering their days off. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But truly, when it comes to defining commitment, what it takes to be a volunteer firefighter, it takes someone very special. My dad was a volunteer firefighter. If you've been through my Pride and Ownership program, I talk about watching my dad. My dad, when I was little, he taught me how to be a firefighter, how to be a roofer. Now, I didn't want to be a roofer, but he did it for my own safety, because I know it's hard for you to imagine this, but I was a wee bit of a challenge for my mom. Well, my mom was a saint, but especially putting up with me. But he'd come down the stairs and my mom would go, "Rocky, get this boy. I'm going to kill this kid. Get him away from me." And he would go, "Come on, Ricky, let's go." And he'd take me roofing with him. And this is back when they brought their gear home with them. And I remember I'm running around, little guy, picking up the wrappers and the scraps. And he comes off the roof and he goes, "Come on, we got to go. There's a fire at the Colonial Manor nursing home over on 9th Avenue, about 2 blocks from where we're at." And we jump on the roofing truck. I could hear the sirens. The guys are coming. And we pull up, and there's fire out the first floor, smoke out the second floor. And I watch my dad put his gear on, leather helmet, boots, his coat, his truckman's belt. And they're hollering about an old lady trapped on the second floor. And the apparatus isn't there. You can hear it coming. He grabs a ladder, a roofing ladder off the truck, throws it up against the side of his building, climbs up, takes his helmet off, smashes out the window, and crawls into smoke with, by the way, a cigar in his mouth, for which he said filtered out the smoke. This is a guy that used to chew me out for not wearing my face piece. Anyway, now you got to understand, I'm a young kid, and to fire service, to Ricky, to me, was all about the red lights, sirens, and bells. It was all about just the red lights, the sirens, and the bells, man. But it all changed for me that day, standing on that front lawn, because that was my daddy. And it seemed like eternity, but he come out a few seconds later with an old lady over his shoulders, like she was a bundle of roofing shingles, and everything changed for me. I want to be a firefighter more than anything else in the world, watching my dad do that. And it didn't matter, all right, to me at the time, whether it was about being paid or being a volunteer or whatever. I really didn't know the difference. I thought a firefighter was a firefighter, because the only difference is one gets paid and one doesn't. So let's just call that what it is. Fire doesn't care. Fire will kill you dead. Doesn't care if you're a volunteer or you're a career firefighter. It does not care. The memorial in Emmitsburg, there's not 2 of them, one for volunteers and one for career guys. And you don't put the career guys in the front and volunteers in the back. One of the chiefs in Texas, in Teague, Texas, that was killed, a volunteer chief, Teague's it's a little southeast of Dallas, was killed in a wall collapse at a commercial building. He's etched on the stone right next to Chief Fahey from the FDNY, who was killed like the next day in a collapse in the Bronx with the FDNY. They don't put them. So my point is, it's just as dangerous. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter whether you're a volunteer career guy. Fire doesn't care. People on the highways that run you down don't care. We're the same family. And some of us out there have a problem with that. And I have very low patience for those people, because a firefighter is a firefighter, and I love my volunteers. I wouldn't still be doing it if I didn't love them. So let's talk about this a little bit here for a second. Okay. Now, obviously, Benjamin Franklin's credited with creating the first volunteer fire department in 1736 in Philadelphia, the Union Fire Company. And it's funny because we're still doing it today, 1736 till now. And I always share this about Ben Franklin when I do my classes, that, here's a guy that created the first volunteer fire department. But, for a guy, now he's born January 17, 1706. And I always talk about, he clearly enjoyed being first. He was the first American diplomat, first ambassador. He was the first storyteller, the first published scientist, first postmaster general, first inventor, first economist. He organized the first lending library, the first medical center for us, Yes, I'm a geek. I love EMS. I love being a paramedic. The first medical center, the first scientific society, the first philosophical society, the first volunteer fire department, the first fire insurance company. He invented the lightning rod. We all know about that. Okay. The static electric generator and the Franklin stove. And the big thing about the stove was it was the smokeless stove, which was a big deal inside back then. And one of the coolest things, he was the only American founding father who signed all four of the major documents that established American independence: the Declaration of Independence, the Treaty with France, the Treaty with England, and the Constitution. Benjamin Franklin was a pretty cool dude. All right. And if you hear me sound a little bit partial sometimes to firefighters in general, here we go. There's a reason. This is a pretty cool guy that created a lot of stuff. The volunteer firefighters, the women and men that I have the honor of serving with, are some pretty cool people. So again, we're still doing it. He created it. Now, what's also entertaining, and I like to help our young volunteer firefighters understand this, especially those that actually paid attention to history in school, that some other famous American volunteers that served with us alongside of us was George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, of course, Samuel Adams, John Hancock, Paul Revere, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, John Barry, Aaron Burr, Benedict Arnold, and if you think we have backstabbers in the fire service now, there you go. James Buchanan and Millard Fillmore, and so many more. It went, when they first created, to being a pretty prestigious thing, to being one that's not so, to one that maybe in the 40s and 50s is a cool thing, to where it wasn't. It kind of ebbs and flows. I think a lot of it, where we're at society-wise at the time, determines what people think of different occupations. But if you talk about what it takes to commit to volunteerism, to being a volunteer, that word commitment that we start off with, defining being committed to a greater cause, being committed to something where if you get paid, it's on-call pay or reimbursement or whatever. But like the volunteer fire department, man, we don't get paid anything. Everything we do is fundraisers. We get a smidgen, and I mean a smidgen, from the county for a budget. We're out there. We just did fill the booth. I was cooking up hot dogs. Everybody was out there not too long ago. We're doing spaghetti feeds and all different kinds of things to fund what we do. Forget all the other costs that are associated with being a volunteer firefighter. So when we talk about commitment, we talk about, those kinds of things. There you go. Okay. I told my buddy Paul Combs, that does all the drawings for us at Fire Engineering, all the cartoons, he's done plenty about the volunteer firefighter. He needs to do one that it's a person hold up a sign saying, come be a volunteer firefighter. Spend your own money on your own gas and diesel for your cars and your trucks, and take time away from your families, away from your work, and away from everything else to come take care of the community and don't get paid. Now, I'm not sounding or complaining or trying to sound like I'd be a whiner about it. The whole point is, we talk about commitment, when you talk about selflessness, there you go. In order to commit to that, and I've said this before, there's a lot of great people that volunteer out there. There are some that volunteer in Scouts, Girls and Boy Scouts, Little League Baseball, at their local church, on the school board or whatever. They volunteer and try to make a difference where they're at. But the commitment that it takes to be a volunteer firefighter is absolutely incredible. So understanding what words and values like commitment, selflessness, how about duty, a duty to act, a duty to serve, and the pride. And the pride I'm talking about is not the pride associated with the word arrogance. I'm talking about the pride associated with the word, with ownership. Okay, the word my, this is my firehouse, this is my town, these are my brothers and sisters and all that. These are the people this is what I protect. I've said it for decades. There's very few occupations where people, when they're off work, wear T-shirts with their logos on it. They put stickers on their cars. No disrespect, but the guy from Subway Sandwiches doesn't have a big Subway sandwich sticker on the back of his truck that says "We do sandwiches," or the guy from Home Depot doesn't have a Home Depot tattoo with a lightning bolt that says "Store 54" on it. I mean, firefighters love what they do, and especially volunteers love to let people in the community know, look, I'm one of those folks that when you call, I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to take care of you. Values such as honor. The honor that it takes to serve proudly. And yes, a tradition, I don't like the word traditions associated with getting firefighters hurt doing silly things. I love the word tradition, which is dedicated to those who have dedicated their life to one of selflessness. But that tradition that goes along with with that, but the honor it takes that we're going to be in people's living rooms and we're we're going to be taking care of some pretty phenomenal people out there, but we're going to be taking care of some folks that are having a hard time. We take care of the person sleeping under the overpass in the morning the same way we do the millionaire's daughter who tried to take her life in the afternoon, everybody in between. We don't pick or choose. When they set the pager off, if you're at home or your phone nowadays, however they do it, you get up, you go to the call. We don't take credit applications and make you submit, forms for when you call, we respond. And for the volunteer firefighter, that means a lot of times if you're allowed to leave work, leave work. If not, it's allowing you to get away from your family, telling your wife, your husband, your kids, I got to go in the middle of dinner, in the middle of parties, in the middle of all kinds of things to go take care of people that you don't even know. And that in my world helps to describe the word passion as well. If you know me, I'm all about passion. I think passion drives success. You can't be great at anything you don't love to do. In fact, you suck. If you don't love what you do, you suck at what you do. I'm just going to say it. You suck at what you do. I won't even give you very good. You're okay. You're okay. All right. But I'm not. I'm way too competitive to be just okay. I've never been picked second in my life. I played baseball when I got to college. I played major level softball. After that, I got inducted into Softball Hall of Fame in 2011. I'm very proud of that. I've never been picked second in my life, especially on the fire ground by a chief. I don't mean competitive in a stupid way. I mean competitive where I want to train to be the best I can. I don't want to go somewhere and look like I don't know what I'm doing. I want to be the one that makes the floor and makes the grab. I want to be the one that successfully vents the roof. I want to be the one that drives and gets us there safely and pumps at the fire. All those different things. The one that kneels down next to someone's grandma and takes her blood pressure while she's having an incident and treats her like she's my own grandma. That's the passion I'm talking about. I ask a lot of people. I love our school teachers. They call them our future builders. But for those who have kids, I ask this question a lot. Which teacher do you like the most? The one that can't seem to get the grades in the computer for your kids, or the one that sends an email out of the blue about your daughter, and it's not a copy and paste job because they're saying something specific about your daughter or your son. I want to be around people that love what they do. And that's for me, what being a volunteer firefighter has been for a long time, around people that really, are there people out there that do it just for the t-shirt? I guess. Are there some people on the career side do it just for a paycheck? I guess. But I don't think there are as many as we make it out to be. I submitted an article to Fire Engineering a little while back, and it's on a class I do called the squeaky. Some of you've heard this if you had it heavy for class. It's called the squeaky hinge, not the squeaky wheel gets the grease, the squeaky hinge. And if you know building construction, most doors have 3 hinges. Some have 4, but most of them have 3 hinges. Okay. And if one of them's squeaking, it's almost always the bottom hinge. It's almost always the bottom one. And if you're at home or in your office, you're at work, and all day long you hear squeak, 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 squeak. You're at a point where you're like, well, somebody just go get the WD-40. And by the end of your day, you're having anxiety problems because that one hinge just has been squeaking all day long. But what you forget is there's 2 other hinges on that door that have been doing the same and equal amount of work all day long, and you haven't heard a peep from them. But we focus on the one hinge. So are there volunteer firefighters out there that do what we do just for the t-shirt, just for the sticker in their car? Yeah. I think it's about that. I think there's about this many that do it because they want to make a difference in their community. Sometimes we focus on that instead of focusing on this. It's always between 62 and 66% of the just under 40,000 fire departments in the United States alone, and our friends in Canada and all over the world. All right. But that being said, that are volunteer firefighters. They're still the backbone of the fire service when it comes to what we do. So being a volunteer firefighter is truly about dedicating yourself to a certain lifestyle, to a certain way. Everything changes for you. you can't be the village idiot anymore. You can't be the buffoon. You can't be, you're wearing a logo on your shirt and on your truck that reflects on all of us. And what you do, and there's somebody joining us from Portugal. Thank you for doing that. What you do in Portugal, or what you do in Alaska, another one from Alaska, Michelle, what you do there reflects on those in Florida. And what they do in Florida reflects on them in California. What they do in California, Nebraska, so on and so forth. People don't look and go, what department are they with? They just see firefighter. So when we're wearing our logos out there, when we're out there representing organizations, we're representing something that's greater than just that. And that's what I'm talking about. We talk about dedicating yourself to a certain lifestyle. Now, I said before, it takes someone special. And let me just say this right now. There's nothing wrong with saying that. Okay, there's nothing wrong with saying it takes someone very special. There's nothing arrogant, conceited, pompous. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, because not everybody could do what you do. Not everybody could get up in the middle of the night and leave their families, get up, run out of a birthday party, for someone in your family, one of your kids. Not everybody can go out in the middle of the night and do CPR on someone and then go back home and just go right back to bed. Not everybody can go out there and cut somebody's daughter out of the car while she's screaming for her life, or crawl into a burning building to try and get to somewhere to put a fire out, or whatever. People have tried, and they've joined your department and said, I didn't think that this was what being a volunteer firefighter meant. And they've said, I just have to go about my life in a different direction. It takes someone very special. It truly does. Someone who has those values, like we already talked about, understanding what, selflessness and duty and tradition and pride and honor, all those different things, what it means to be a person of integrity and all that, to be a good person with this. It takes someone very special. Part of that too is understand it takes someone who gets it. And the it I'm talking about is, I'm sure a lot of you have heard that phrase before. So and so gets it. We've got a mayor who gets it now. When I coached my daughter's softball team for years, I say our girls get it, man. They're good sports. They're mentors to other young girls. Man, they get. You know why they get it? Because their parents get it. Well, there are firefighters who get it, and some that don't yet, because frankly, the older firefighters are not explaining to them what it is. I'll get people to write me emails telling me I've got these 3 new firefighters and they don't get it. I'm like, did you explain to them what it is? This isn't voodoo or magical. They're not going to get it unless you explain it to them. I'm amazed when we talk about it, how many people don't know our history. I'm amazed how many people don't know where the Maltese Cross comes from. The Maltese Cross. I ask people in class all the time, if you want to help connect the dots for your younger firefighters, you got to start at the beginning where it all came from. We talked about Benjamin Franklin, everything leading up to that, from after him to why we do what we do. I do a history class called Our History. This should be day one of the Fire Academy. The very first thing you should teach a firefighter is why we exist. So when I talk about there are firefighters that don't know where the Maltese Cross came from, they'll say, wait a minute, Chief, I saw it's in your Pride and Ownership book. It was the Knights of St. John fighting the Saracens in the Holy Wars on the island of Malta and so on and so forth. And I'm like, yeah, I've heard the Dungeons and Dragons story too, but who was the first agency in North America to use the Maltese Cross as a symbol for the fire service? And they'll look at you and I'll go, anybody know? And someone will guess Philadelphia, Boston, whatever. Cincinnati was the first paid department, but who was the first one to use it as a symbol for the fire service? And then I give them a hint. Still today, they are the largest combination volunteer career department in the world. And they'll look at again and again, someone goes Boston, someone goes Philly, and I go, no, it's New York City. And I'll ask the volunteers, how many volunteer firefighters in the room knew already that New York City has 9 volunteer fire companies still today? They're not part of the FDNY because most of them were there before there was an FDNY. There's 9, every borough but Manhattan. So Queens, Staten Island, Brooklyn, and the Bronx. You could go to a call, my buddy John Salka in the Bronx, and a Volley engine will show up. There's certain areas. I mean, they're still. So back in the 1800s, when they were the New York Volunteer Fire Department, the New York Fire Department, they were going to move into being career, which a lot of career departments, the volunteers came. Volunteers said, I'm going to go be a full-time firefighter. So in 1865, when they went to create the FDNY, they couldn't because of a law proclamation, whatever it was. So they weren't allowed to call it the Fire Department of New York, the FDY. So they named themselves the Metropolitan Fire Department. In 1865, they were the MFD for about 5 years, and the MFD switched from a shield, all right, to a Maltese cross. And if you look, it was the more like pointed ones. I have the pictures in my presentation. And then when they became the FDY several years later, they switched to the Maltese cross that you see today, the more traditional one, if you will, with that. But there's firefighters that have their firefighting badge on with the scramble in the middle, and they'll look and I'll ask them, "So I love that scramble. What's that in the middle?" And they'll go, "Well, that's a trumpet. They'll say it's a bugle, which they're not bugles. Please don't call them bugles." And I'm not poking fun at the bugle brief, but my buddy Chief Buckman knows about that. They're not bugles. You can't eat them. You can't play music on them. They're not bugles. All right, they're speaking horns or trumpets. And my good buddy Professor Glenn Corbett and I, we love reminding people of that. But you look in the middle and you see like a hook, a ladder, maybe a helmet and a trumpet, and then you see on a lot of them this little stick. It's this little stick that goes up, like it almost points towards your chin on your badge on your chest, and it's a stick with a little glow. That's a parade torch. Those go back to the volunteer days, and we don't have time to even talk about the significance, but there's a reason why they're in the middle of the badge. There's a lot of firefighters that don't know where the first leather style helmet came from, the first traditional helmet came from, and they'll talk about Cairns and Brothers and that. And it's funny because a lot of them go, "Well, I've seen this picture of Ben Franklin wearing a leather helmet, and I like it, all that stuff, and I love Ben Franklin. But there's one problem with Ben Franklin wearing a leather helmet. They weren't invented then. In fact, he was like dead when Henry T. Gradicrap created the first leather traditional helmet. So there's the picture of Ben Franklin wearing the helmet, the leather helmet. Someone had to paint that on his head. It's not true. Henry Gradicrap created the first leather helmet. All right, actually with a leather topper, not an eagle, in 1836. All right, he was a New York volunteer firefighter. He's a foreman, which that means lieutenant back then, foreman. He was a volunteer firefighter. He was a luggage maker by trade. And he created the first leather fire helmet, the traditional style helmet with the combs. And he sold it to the Cairns brothers, the two brothers, in 1868, and that's where it went from there. But that picture of one of my favorites, Ben Franklin wearing a helmet, is impossible. But knowing where the helmet came from, I'm just talking about those who get it. The whole thing. There's so much more. There's firefighters that go to funerals that don't know why we ring the bell 5 times, 5 times, 5 times, 5 times at a funeral, or we do the 4 5s at a site. Chicago is 335. And they'll say it's a line of duty death. They said, no, it's not. That's the telegraph signal. See that over my shoulder, that fire alarm box? That's the telegraph signal for line of duty death way back when. 5 rings, 5 rings, 5 rings, 5 rings. Told everybody in the firehouse, stand by for line of duty death. Then they do like the box number 2232. And then they would tap out a 7, a 6, and a 7, which told everybody in the city that batch 767 was killing line of duty at that box 2232 last night. Now, this may seem like a big deal to you, but it is if you want your volunteer firefighters to understand where it all came from and why. Simple things like the leather helmet was created by a volunteer firefighter. So to all my career friends, God love you. Every one of you that's wearing either a leather traditional style helmet or the composite ones, that whole design came from a volunteer firefighter in New York. So there you have it. Now, there's some people out there that like to refer to professionals versus volunteers and all that. And that's always kind of bent me a little bit because I think career and volunteer firefighters are professionals. I was up in Canada doing a program, love my Canadian brothers and sisters, and I was doing an afternoon program, and I noticed this half of the room, same uniforms, this half of the room was acting differently than this one. And I finally asked, are you guys from 2 different districts? And they said, no, we're the professional officers. They're the volunteers. And I went, oh, so I guess we have our terminology mixed up. They said, no. I said, no. I said, there are all kinds of businesses. I don't want to say it in the show. I want to keep it classy. There are people out there that call themselves professionals that are not professionals. For that matter, I don't know what kind of T-shirts or stickers they wear, but I've never seen any even that do. What I'm saying is we're both professionals. My good friend, Tom Merrill, uh, has a column with Fire Engineering Magazine, has a podcast, and has just written a book titled "The Professional Volunteer Fire Department," Professional Volunteer Firefighter, and he talks about that. And someone from Austria just said where I live, 98% of the firefighters are volunteers. So again, we are the backbone of the fire service. Like I said, the only difference is one gets paid and one doesn't. That's it. But we both serve a purpose. We both are committed to something greater than just some ordinary cause. Okay. The difference now from the old days with volunteer firefighters is in the old days, when they blew the siren, you could run away from Billy's hardware store, and Billy didn't care if he lost money right now. He didn't care that he lost money. Well, there's very few places like that today that still allow that. Some do. We've got a buddy of mine in New York where they still allow him. He's working for the city in public works, that when the siren goes off, he can drop what he's doing and go staff the volunteer fire engine. But it's not like it was in the old days, which puts some stresses on the current volunteer firefighters to make calls and stay connected, if you will, or to stay up on their skills, because they're limited. Drill nights. In the old days, you could get away with, to be honest, less drill nights a lot of places. You can't anymore. You look at today's volunteer firefighter and the requirements to be a volunteer, not just your firefighter 1 or 2 training, but maybe some, emergency medical, some EMS training, some hazmat training, all the things, and a driver training and everything, the classroom, and then the hands-on and all the stuff. I mean, I used to tease my dad, because he's a firefighter in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I'm like, what did you do back then? He's like, what? I go, what did you guys just sit around and play checkers? I go, what did you? He goes, oh, we did a lot of work. I go, yeah, but look at what we have to do now. So you look at what we're doing drill night wise now. I work for a great chief at my volunteer fire department at Wichita West, and when he asked me to take over training for him, one of the things I asked him was, we used to do like, once a week. Monday nights is our, so first Monday night is our meeting night, our business meeting night. Second was, rig checks, station maintenance. And then third and fourth, if there was a third and fourth, was training. And I'm like, God, I've got like 11 and a half years worth of training topics that I want to do. So I went to him and the other officers and said, would you be willing to look at, let's take our apparatus rig check night and let's make that another training night. And let's just split up the rigs throughout the month. Before our drills, we take a couple rigs a night and we check them right before a drill. Like my buddy John Salka, his department in Orange County, New York, South Blooming Grove, they check the rigs every drill night. They check them regardless. Before they start drill, he'll go, okay, let's go. Come on, let's go. Get out there. Let's check the rigs. His guys will check the rigs and then they do their drill for the night. So we're doing that now. Last night we did auto extrication, and because the weather was pushing through, we delayed it. But usually what we do is right beforehand, we check the 2 rigs that are signed, for that night, get them knocked out. Now, we do check them away from that too, but we were able to grab a little bit more in the way of some drill nights. So, you look at what, from then to now, the meeting nights, the business meeting nights have never really been a problem. You tend to get more people that show for the business, nights, the business meetings than you do for the drills. The fundraisers that we have to do in order to pay for a lot of the stuff we're doing. Chief Buckman and I were talking about before we went live about where's our money. We're both very, very, very partial law enforcement. I was a cop a long time ago. I wasn't very good. When I got hired as a cop, waiting to be hired as a firefighter, I was already a volunteer firefighter and a part-timer. I sucked at being a cop because I got shot, stabbed, and burned my first year as a cop. So I sucked at being a cop. But that being said, where's our money when it comes to it? Where's the funding for us that we need to operate? I love law enforcement. If you're a police officer, thank you. God bless you. My wife works at the sheriff's office here. But there's very few, I can't think of any volunteer police departments. There's some that have auxiliary reserves, but there's very few volunteer police departments. So where's our money when it comes to that? The other part of it nowadays is the whole picking and choosing of calls. I tell this story a lot. I was in New England, and I was about at 2:00 in the afternoon. I'm in a firehouse having coffee, and I'm going to do a pride and ownership program that evening for them. And at 2:00, they blew the siren, set the pagers off for an inside gas leak. And I'm watching through the window where I'm watching in the kitchen, and a couple firefighters show up, and next day I see the lights going on the pumper, and and the lights are going and nobody's showing up. So they blow the siren again and set the page off again, nobody. And they went along, the chief says, just go. So those two guys jump on a pumper and they go to this gas leak. And it was like 2:40, about 40 minutes later-ish. They blow the siren and set the pages off for a structure fire. And I swear to God, you needed valet parking. There were so many cars, people were sliding in there sideways like they're driving the Batmobile. That's an old show for some of you young guys. Anyway, they slide it. I mean, I was like, where did everybody come from? And they're like, oh, I just heard the call, or I just got home. And I'm like, no, you didn't. You're picking and choosing your calls. When I started as a volunteer firefighter, Barney Sadowski was a retired district chief from Chicago, was my volunteer chief. He said, Lasky, I'm going to make this simple for you, okay, because that's what I need. He gave me this. I have one sitting over my shoulder here. You can't see it, an old Plectron. And no lights on. He says, go home, plug this in the wall. He says, and it's going to make noises for about 2-3 different things. It's either going to make a noise every Tuesday when we test it, for Thursday's drill night, or for calls. Tell you what, whenever it makes a noise, just come up to the firehouse. If it's a call, you should be coming here. If it's training, you should be here to train. And you know what? If it's testing, I come up and clean something. There's always something to be cleaned. He didn't say, hey, why don't you wait and see if it's an exciting call? And if it's an exciting call, come up to the firehouse. If it's boring, I just roll over and go to sleep. And Freddie Iano had like 28 years in our department where I was a volunteer, and I could see the firehouse from my living room where I was at, where I lived. I didn't have to drive. I just run through the backyard of my neighbor's house. I could be at the firehouse. We could be going for a gas leak at 2 a.m, and he could beat me to the firehouse. And my whole thing is to the young guys and gals is, what's your excuse? Here's a guy with 28 years on the job that's beating us all there in his car, and you're rolling over. So you want us to be around. You want the volunteer fire service all over the world to exist and continue, then make the calls. That's it, plain and simple. Make the calls. If you can and you're available, make the calls, okay? Now, being a volunteer firefighter also means having the ability to balance your personal and your firehouse lives. The first family, the one at home, and the second family went to firehouse, you have to strike that balance. I know a lot of great volunteer firefighters that have ruined relationships and marriages because they fell in love with their firehouse and forgot to stay in love with everything at home. And it hurts sometimes. You got to remember that every time you run out the door, there's somebody you're leaving behind, whether it's mom or dad or a spouse or partner that's listening to a radio or wondering if you're okay, and so on and so forth. So you've got to strike that balance if you're going to be successful as a volunteer firefighter. Now, from there, if we move to the whole recruitment and retention thing, my buddy Paul Combs has done several drawings, several cartoons on this topic, and one has a volunteer fire chief. He's at the volunteer well. It says volunteer well on it. And he's got his gear on, and he just reeled up the bucket. He's dumping the bucket out from the volunteer well, and one drop of water drips out, and all he says is, this is getting scary, because it's getting harder and harder to recruit from our communities. It's getting tougher, and you can't just put a sign up in front of your firehouse that says, bad pay, cool helmet, come see us anymore. You've got to be creative with how you recruit and retain your people. Number one, hiring the right people matters. There's way too many embarrassing stories for all fire departments, especially volunteer fire departments, where somebody does something ridiculous, I'll just say that, and gets arrested or whatever, and then that department's fighting to earn the trust back from the public and all that. Well, if you don't do good background checks, if you don't have a good hiring process, you're going to hire problems. They don't become problems after you hired them. You missed it. So having a good hiring and background check process for your volunteer department is huge, especially nowadays. You're going to be letting people into you're going to give the keys to all the other businesses, which are Knox boxes if you have those. They're going to be other people's homes where there's nobody home or they're out in the street. We need people of integrity. We need people of honor to be able to serve within that capacity. The new generation, stop blaming generations. When we come to recruiting, we're hiring some 18, 19-year-old pretty incredible kids in Texas. All right. And we're hiring some people in their 50s that are awesome too. I've said this for the longest time. How arrogant do you have to be to blame another generation, or think that your generation is better than another one? I asked my dad years ago, what was it like hiring people in the 60s? And my dad said, you mean them damn hippies? And for you young guys, if you watch the movie Forrest Gump, Jenny's a hippie. but we have short-term memory. We forget that we've had periods where we've had difficulty recruiting people and hiring people with different core values in their lives and different things going on, different commitments. So the new generation, are the generations different? Absolutely. Figure them out, read them like you would a building, do your size up, figure out who they are, and then work with them. But stop blaming generations. We need to mentor, we need to step up. You don't harass, you don't demean, you don't humiliate. Sorry. I have a zero tolerance policy for bullies and thugs in the fire service. You don't harass people, you don't violate their rights. All right. Or you're done. Embrace it, figure out who they are, and figure out what their desires and their needs and their wants are. Okay. Who lives in your community? What kind of folks do you have living there in the way of occupations? There's some communities I know that it's pretty hotcha-cha on the high end, and it's hard to get some of those people to volunteer. But then I go out to California, and there's a group called Wine Country to the Rescue that they fund the volunteer fire departments, like hundreds of thousands of training a year. And a lot of these millionaire winery people are volunteer firefighters because they want to make a difference. They want to make a difference. So it's all about reaching out to those in your community, understanding who's there. Other considerations, what are your response districts guidelines? Some people are like, well, you have to live in town. Well, that may have worked 50 years ago, but nowadays we have to be a little bit more out there with things. I warn a lot of fire chiefs, don't get caught just filling turnout gear. If the numbers are down, hire good quality people. Because if you're looking to hire 10 people and you hire 8 good ones and two nitwits, guess what? You're going to be spending all your time on them. I'd rather run a couple short and hire good people than just fill turnout gear. Okay. And then how do you do it? I always joke about Facebook, and that's the senior citizen social media out there. Facebook still works, but if you want to recruit from all walks of life, you better do Facebook, you better do TikTok, you better do Instagram, you better do everything. And then you need to go out and recruit throughout your community. Go to the churches. Go to some of the different volunteer organizations. People are already doing it and all that. Reach out to everybody in your community to get them to join, to get them in there. Okay. But again, don't get caught just filling turnout gear, because you'll end up hiring some problems you'll be dealing with. How about some incentive programs? There's a lot of places out there that have state pension programs. I think it's LoSAP in New York, and a couple others have that. They do in Texas, where if you earn so many points for meetings and drills and calls, that years down the road, it's not a lot of money, but it helps. You end up with a pension. For the longest time, they may still do it. In Aspen, Colorado, my buddy Rick Ballantyne and the chief, if you're a volunteer in good standing, you got your immediate family's health insurance covered and paid for. Nice benefit. Reimbursements for some places when it comes to fuel and some other things. I know one department out west that they built an apartment building next to their firehouse, and they'll let you live there for free if you're a volunteer making calls. College tuition. I know a county in Maryland that if you're in good standing 2 years, for 2 years, they'll pay for your college tuition. Books, you can't go away, because what happened, you have to do like certain nights, you have to sleep in the firehouse, you have to make so many calls. But they got smart that way, and it actually doesn't cost them that much. Sending people to outside training conferences. Yes, Xbox in the firehouse. We used to play checkers and cards. Let them have fun in the firehouse. Find reasons. I know a guy that put dodgeball. Jerry Duffield, he's the ops chief in Flower Mound, Texas. He put a dodgeball court in the back of his firehouse. You have to wear gear, and they play dodge. I mean, very creative ways to get people up to the firehouse. A lot of people have written off their Explorer and their junior firefighter programs, not realizing, I know it's a lot of work, but what a great tool that is to recruit people. Citizens Fire Academies. It's hard to run them, maybe like a career department. You have people that are in the firehouse, but I've had a lot of people go through Citizens Fire Academies and go, okay, so if I wanted to do this as a volunteer, how much more training do I have to do? I'm like, well, pretty much what you just did. But no. So how much? I go, no, pretty much what you just did. I mean, and then this. And they realize, that's the hook. Not only do we hit up and we get business people on our side that might make donations to us later, but that's kind of the hook. So we overlook Citizens Fire Academies to help us recruit. The area assignments. I love giving people responsibility. Here, you're in charge of ladders. You're in charge of tools. You're in charge of that. I know a department through a grant that got a recruitment trailer. I'm walking across their apparatus floor and I go, is that your like pub ed trailer? They go, that's our recruitment trailer. And you get up and it had a real cool wrap with their logo and fire scenes. And like a food truck, you open up the windows, there's two big TVs, and they start playing these videos of them fighting fires and cut people out of cars. And somebody comes up and talks on the video to you. And they bring the props out and the gear and stuff and let you try stuff on. He says, we drag that to every Friday night football game, every craft show. We drag that thing everywhere. And I'm like, God, this is a great idea. Why aren't more people doing this? We have pub ed trailers. We have sprinkler coalition trailers, but why not a recruitment trailer that volunteer departments, some of you that could share. You could have 5-6 departments sharing the same trailer, dragging different stuff, scheduling and getting out there to get people recruited. I think one of the other ways is find me one more like you. I've said this for the longest time. Excuse me. Grab 2 or 3 of your all-stars, Chief, and bring them in the office and go, okay, so John, Cynthia, Rick, go find me one more like you. Go find me a relative, a neighbor, someone at your kid's little league team, at church. Find me one. If your all-stars can find one more like them, there you go. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes that helps with the recruiting part of it too. Like I said, you can put the signs out, you can put the ads out there, websites, whatever, but you've got to be creative on social media. You got to be creative on where you go and who you talk to and how you do it. Rather than I say recruitment is really tough in the volunteer fire service, which it is challenging. But then I ask those same departments, what are you doing to recruit? They go, we put the blinking sign in front of the firehouse. We put it on Facebook. Well, you've got to do more than that. Nowadays, you have to be out there doing stuff. You have to be out there marketing your mission. You got to be out there throwing a hook out there and drawing people in and saying, if you want to be part of something special, if you want to be part of the coolest profession in the world, being a volunteer firefighter, then this is it, man. This is it. If you want something so special, you'll be doing this for a long time, and you'll be telling your kids, your grandkids, and your grandkids about this. They're going to put this on your tombstone. They're going to put a Maltese cross. Your picture's going to be a wall somewhere because it is so cool being a volunteer firefighter. And again, it takes someone very special, like I said before. So there's lots of other ideas out there if you're willing to look for when it comes to recruiting people. Now, part of retaining them means training them. Training and motivating our next generation of volunteer firefighters, and like the department training calendar. I'm a big one on making it realistic, organize it on topic, but make the drills and the meetings interesting. Have some fun. Not the torture drills, but a lot of firefighters, they don't mind sitting through the classes, but they want to go out and they put their gear on. They want to break stuff. They want to spray water. Look. I don't care whether you're a career volunteer firefighter. They want to play firefighter. So there you go. So in fact, the majority of the volunteers I know, they want to do well, but they need the rest of us that have been doing this for a while to share with them, to train them, to mentor them, to give the tools so they can be great at what they're doing. Don't cheat them. Don't hold back. Create more of you. If you're one of those, if you're listening to this show, if you're watching this show, you're already one of the great ones. You're already one of the good ones. Your assignment is to go find more like you. That's what you do. All right. So when it comes to mentoring volunteers, I've used this saying for a long time: one generation plants the trees while another enjoys the shade. That's how it works. All right. You're not doing anything for just tomorrow. Stop hiring for just tomorrow. You're looking for the long run. Who's going to be vested? Who's going to give me a couple years? Okay. Maybe that's all we'll get. Who's going to get me maybe 3 to 5 years, maybe 10 to 15? Who's going to be a lifer? Because that's what we see in the volunteer fire service. Up and down the roster is a whole bunch of different groups. But we've got to understand that it takes an investment from you. And this is long haul, long road stuff. Nothing in the fire service that's instant is any good. I've been doing a lot of duty death investigations for a long time, and none of the instant stuff is good. Okay. So let's talk briefly here about the benefits of mentoring our volunteer firefighters. What does it do? It shares insights and information. It gives you a chance to share with your new volunteer firefighter about the department, about the fire service, about what your organization does. If you're doing that and you're giving all that information, it mentoring programs encourage junior officers to kind of climb higher on that ladder of responsibility in your department. It improves communication feedback when you have people that nobody's wearing I'm the mentor tag. The people that are mentors are the people that want to make a difference in the people's lives around them. I have a guy that I love, John. One of these guys, he's just John, I'll just say John, and I asked him once, why is being a mentor such a big deal to you? And he said, because I want to have a say in the future of my fire department. And I went, God, that is so awesome. That is what a great thing. I want to have a future. I want to have a say in the future of my fire department. That's why most people mentor. They don't do it for ego. They do it to make a difference. That being said, it creates higher levels of job satisfaction, commitment when people know that you care about them. In that process, and Chief Buckman and I were talking about this before we went on about, the networking. It creates a system for networking and professional development where people can pick up the phone and say, hey, Chief Buckman, I got a question for you. Look, have you ever had this problem before? You ever had this situation? I want to do this. Just tell me if I'm on the right track with this before I step on a landmine, those kinds of things. Again, your mentoring process is going to improve the overall quality of your department's organizational culture. People get promoted faster because it's not just, well, he or she seems like a good guy. They've got something to back it up. Okay. It builds that strong team. So who makes that? I mentioned this a little bit already. Who makes that good mentor? Someone who accepts the role as a trust position, if you're a mentor. If somebody calls, I'll pick on my good friend Chief Buckman. If somebody calls him and says, Chief, and they share something personal, and he goes out and he starts telling people about it, breaks that trust, the learning process is screech. Confidentiality is huge when it comes to being a mentor, to get people to open up and say, maybe explain to you where they're weak. All right. Someone who's successful and accomplished is huge. A motivator, someone who's a motivator, someone who has obviously a passion for teaching and helping others, the willingness to help others, and a good communicator and listener. Some of the challenges you're going to have with mentoring your young volunteer firefighters is the attitudes, beliefs, and values of others that don't match up to the organization or yours. Poor people skills, egos that eat brains. Egos and power have ruined more organization. I make fun of myself every day. There's some people out there take themselves way too seriously. I mentioned the confidentiality thing. And again, the challenge is some of the bullies and thugs. There's no reason to demean, harass, humiliate someone in your firehouse. In fact, the people I admire, the people I look up to, they don't do that and they never have. Okay. So what can you do to mentor your young volunteers coming on board? How about provide a conducive environment? I saw this at a department I was teaching at. They went as a volunteer department. They went on a report of a structure fire. When they came back, I went to use the men's room, which was on the apparatus floor. And as I'm walking across the floor, there's a captain and a young firefighter between the tailboard and the bumper and engine. And I'm walking, I'm not trying to eavesdrop, but I was, And I heard the cap say to the kid, "What are you doing Tuesday night about 7:30?" And the kid said, nothing. He goes, "Good. You meet me up at 7:30. We're going to go over our SCBAs together." And that's all I heard. So later on, I called him and said, "What was going on?" I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I heard. He goes, "Well, we got out there and his air pack was all screwed up. And you know how some of the firefighters, they tease you. Look at W. He can't put his air pack on." He goes, "I don't work that way." So what I was asking him was, "Look, Tuesday night, there's usually nobody up here about 7:30. Come up here. You and I will do our doffing drills together." And I looked at my buddy and I said, "I want to work for that guy. I want to work for that captain." And that's the kind of captain I want to work for. Someone who will go out of their way to help another young volunteer firefighter be better at what they do. Because this isn't just about delivering pizzas and newspapers. This is about saving people's lives, including your own. And complacency is a fancy word for laziness, period. Okay. So promote and support the mentoring. Discuss the advantages, why we're talking about it, and prepare, and then do it. The other thing we got to talk about, is how do you promote? Elections have always been a challenge because it gives you about, if you do them every 12 months, it gives you about 35 days to try and do what you're going to do. Then you're already worried about getting reelected. You know what I'm saying? And now my department, we elect the chiefs. They alternate every 2 years, but they pick the company officers. So you get your job done. So how do you handle your elections, your appointments? Do you do any testing? Again, how do you bridge strategic plans from one group to the other if there's a constant movement? How do you train your officers? Are you doing company officer training? All right. Chief Buckman talked about what you'll be seeing here in the near future. Chief officer training. How about going to FDIC, the Fire Power Instructors Conference in Indianapolis, or Fire Rescue International, which they actually move that around so it might be easier for you to get to. The National Fire Academy, which offers a ton of free classes, and all the others that are out there. The other enhancers are, do you have good, strong SOPs and SOGs? Your association rules and regulations, are they realistic? Are they reachable by everybody? Do they pertain? Are you using the talents and assets of all your members? And what do you do for your former members? Do you have a wall of flame that you put the pictures of your retired and former members and dedicate a wall to them? When they come back, do you introduce them at the different functions and the different ceremonies? And do you treat them like royalty, like they should be? The honor that they've earned and they deserve. Do you have a department history committee? Do you have somebody in charge of recording all apparatus from your first piece of apparatus to the ones you have now? All your people, their ranks, all the news stories, all the videos, all the different things, tools and equipment. You have somebody take care of that, because once it's gone, it's gone. Are you doing the ceremonies, like the award ceremonies? How about a new member swearing in ceremony, promotional ceremonies, retirement ceremonies? I love seeing, I was pushing all this stuff years ago. My godfather, Chief Al Brunacini, used to call me from Phoenix, Rick's the ceremonies guy. I send those policies out all the time, but when it comes, I love seeing people. We started a long time ago, the new apparatus winding down and pushing ceremonies like they used to do way back when. Some were even before they had horses. Okay, new firehouses, honorary firefighters and chiefs, all those different things. To recognize your people, especially those that do it for free. All right. Some of the other enhancers, as we're looking to close things out for our session today, is staying involved in the community, getting out there with programs and activities. I had somebody say, well, we don't have like a grocery store. I said, yeah, we have. The only thing you have in town is one gas station. Then pick a day a month. You go there and you do blood pressures for those folks. In the winter, do you go check on your senior citizens, see if they're okay? When there's extreme heat, you do that. There's ways to be involved. Get your state associations involved. Get hooked up with the National Volunteer Fire Council. Market your mission and get out of the firehouse. And lastly, my buddy Paul Combs has another cartoon drawing that was awesome. You can find it, and it's titled "Endangered Species." And there's a panda holding the sign that says pandas. There's a polar bear hold the polar bear sign. There's a Bengal tiger hold the sign, and there's a volunteer firefighter. I've got a stone sitting behind me. One of my mentors gave me a long time ago, and this really applies to those I love the most, my volunteer firefighters. But it takes someone special. Are you that someone? We need more like you. And I will say this over and over again. I am so proud, so proud to be a volunteer firefighter. Chief Buckman.
Oh, Chief Lasky, thank you very much. I'll echo one of the guys' comments on here of everybody needs to hear this message. So it's a shame we don't have 700,000 people on here, but that would overload the system. But here at the end, you talked about pomp and circumstances. I'm putting those words on there because I do believe that's important. And I'll use this real quick story. My wife, who is my age, well, she's 1 year younger than I am, just volunteered. She's retired now. She volunteered.
So she's 40. She's about 40, 35, 40.
Yeah, about 40. And she volunteered, and she got a plaque in a frame, but the frame was broken. So she came home and got one of the frames out of my frame cache and put that certificate, and it's hanging or sitting on the table in the living room. So my point is, it doesn't matter how new, how young, how old, how long you've been in, pomp and circumstance is important. Recognizing what they're doing, especially in the volunteer world. So, it's
Chief, and real quick, what you're saying, and you and I've talked about this before, how many people do you see that drive by some of the hardest working people out there, factory workers, driving by that factory, in July when it's 120 degrees outside, go, God, I sure wish I go back and work that press. But they drive by their volunteer firehouse. They go, God, I wish I could be there having a cup of coffee on the kitchen table or sitting there in a meeting on a drill night afterwards, just, the conversations where we just talk shop.
Right. Absolutely.
That sense of family that you see volunteers have. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, you did notice that Portugal is here. Nuno is here. And I always hope I'm doing his name right, or her. I'm not real sure. But this person is pretty religious about being in most all of our webinars. Austria is one of the persons, not seen her before, Katharina. And Alaska is here. And I'm sure there's other people out there that just didn't sign into the chat. But Chad H. thanks you for your time and knowledge today. And Zachary says such a great message. So I don't really have any questions, but I'll end this with, you talked at the very beginning about President of the United States who've been volunteer firefighters, and you didn't go to today. But George H.W. Bush was a volunteer firefighter in Kennebunkport, and George H. Bush was a volunteer firefighter in Texas. Now, I'm not sure how many interior structural fires they fought, but they were on the roster. And so you're right. The volunteer fire service has had a long history of involvement by people who went on to do very important and great things. So that's another one of those benefits that people can get just by being in the volunteer fire department.
Well, John, everything we do today as a fire service family, complete fire service family, all started in 1736 with Ben Franklin in over here,
Correct.
and it has just grown. And I think sometimes we forget that when you look at everything from gold leaf to the color of fire engines and why red came about. And when I do my history program, I go back. Jamestown was our first unofficial building code, the proclamation they wrote after the burning of Jamestown when it burned down, that no longer thatch roofs and you had to have so much distance between structures for exposure problem, and you had to hang a whaling hook, the first pike pole, if you will, up there. You pull out, and you get the stuff that's so exciting. Like I said, the parade torches, that there's guys that have badges don't even know what that is, and I'm like, and it's not their fault. It's the senior people in the department that don't explain. Golly, man, look at the parades, the pictures, volunteers marching down the street, the uniforms, the red shirts with the buttons and the high top helmets, and the places like Perseverance. This is an old helmet, one of my many helmets I have here. The Perseverance Fire Company. There's so many cool things. Just let your people get into it.
Well, we had some other comments from our people. Good presentation. Combination Department, Ohio, Oklahoma's here. Again, we thank everybody for coming. Rick, you use this quote quite often in the beginning of the presentation about does the volunteer member get it? Do they get it? And I think that's what I want to sort of close your presentation with. That is one of the things as it relates to defining commitment is helping that individual who becomes a volunteer firefighter get it. Understand the importance, understand the brotherhood, the sisterhood, and how important and valued that is in your future. And I think that was a big part of your message today. And again, I thank you very much for your efforts. And you've always done good thing. You've led the fire service in many directions, and I thank you for that as well. So,
well, Chief, before we close things out, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but for a lot of our viewers and those that watch this, hopefully hundreds of times after this. Chief, thank you for what you do. I can think of very few people. Glenn Corbett's one, our good friend, Professor Glenny, that is as dedicated to the fire service, but especially the volunteers that you've done, that you've represented all of us as the I-Chiefs president, but you've represented the whole family. But selfishly, what you've done for volunteer firefighters is incredible. Thank you, John, for doing that.
Thank you. Well, again, to all the attendees, thank you very much for coming. We have another webinar scheduled for next week. I'm sorry, I forgot what the name, who's doing it next week, but we are scheduling webinars now into March. So look at our schedule and please sign on, or if you can't sign on during this live, then get it when it's recorded. So with that, thank you all very much. Have a great day. God bless everyone.
Thank you. God bless. Be careful.
Thanks, Rick. Take care.
Thank you, buddy.
Bye-bye.